Is Monday, June 9th, 6:35. This is the old farm district. We also have Jen from Southeast Bend here. This is our monthly meeting, and that the last meeting for the Bend fiscal year of 2024-2025, since they ended June 30th. I thought we had somebody else on. We had some other people when I saw them a second ago.
Did I believe they dropped?
We may have lost them. If we lost you, sign back in. Do apologize. We can do quick introductions. I'm James DeRofi. I'm the board chair.
I'm Ann Perry, a community member.
Jen Sawyer, social media.
Ross Tenzie, board member.
Brian Briscoe, chair of Southeast Bend. Graham Kennedy, board member.
And Karen Johnson, our land use chair, is on vacation. That said, oh wait, there's people wondering, we need to get that note for that slide filter. We keep forgetting it. For people that don't know, we do meet at the Larkspur Center on the second Monday of every month, starting at 6:30. The meetings we try to keep to an hour. This meeting is sort of interesting. How should we do land use? There's been a lot going on. That said, part of this meeting is we're going to be discussing how or if or what the neighborhoods should do regarding the boundaries and how we should approach the city. Why does this matter? Land use notification is a huge issue regarding development and land use planning for the state of Oregon. Part of the Oregon Constitution requires public input in land use planning. At this point, there have been two massive urban growth boundary expansions. One of them, Caldera, was done through a special legislative session, and the other one is Stevens Tract, also done through a special legislative session at the state level, which means the normally 2 to 3 year process of citizen input from Bend residents and Deschutes County residents was foregone. If that's the right word. Circumvented or ignored. There we go. I love the synonyms. So perfect. Bypass. There we go. So for land use for tonight, there was a Caldera development, which is south of Caldera Ranch, which is south of Caldera High School, had their first public meeting, and we did not get notified of it. I got told about it 24 hours before the meeting. Myself and Karen managed to make the meeting. We did put in to their official record that we weren't notified, and that's part of the reason for this meeting. So part of that development is they're going to be building 700 to 800 units. There's a certain percentage of them, which is a high percentage, I think almost a third, 30%, that must be designated affordable housing. The term affordable housing is an actual metric, according to the state of Oregon, based upon the area median income. So it's not just some arbitrary number. So the primary entrance is going to be Broster House Road and Knott Road. You can see it on that map. It's sort of a, hang on.
Which development? We're talking about the one across from Caldera. South of Caldera.
South of Caldera. So this was the meeting that was last week. We are hoping to have another meeting, and we're going to try to invite all of our members in Old Farm as well. It might just be a replay, but that's fine. So it's basically an old, huge gravel pit in between Tecampe and the road to the west, Woodside.
You said Broster.
So Broster House is going to be on the north side.
Coming out, it'll be around about
Knott, you mean?
So Broster House is going to hit into Knott, and then where
Oh,
Broster
that's
House,
right.
yeah,
That's
so
right.
Talking about the Broster House right there.
yeah, so where Broster House hits in the Knott there's most likely gonna be a roundabout, and that's gonna be the primary entrance to this massive development.
And about right here.
Correct. When we get the official documents from them, we will post them to our website. But like I said, we were omitted, so I'm going off of memory, and I don't want anyone to quote me on anything, because technically it's not official, since I was just a guest.
Yeah, the question is, I attended the meeting, I found out the day of, about 6 hours before the meeting. I guess, oh, Jennifer. Thank you for doing that, 'cause I wouldn't have known it otherwise.
No.
None of us knew.
There were only about 7 people there.
Correct.
Seven people?
So there were 7 people for an online meeting discussing the creation of an 800 house development.
7 people, Karen and me were 2 of them. And I think there were some other ones, but it was.
And it's
It
800.
wasn't well represented at all.
It's 800 units, like 228, I think, are single family homes.
More than that, significantly more than that.
30% is 714.
Who's the developer on that? AKS is the major engineering firm. As far as the developer, they have not sold lots, they have not done their breakdown in anything at this point.
It's a long process.
It's a long process, but this is the start of the process. Their best estimates, they were gonna have to be started in 2 years. They've done their traffic analysis. There were some things that a few people did point out. And then there was an interesting tidbit that I learned. And that is, we have these traffic analysis done by these developers for these master plans. And nowhere is there a requirement for evacuation routes or any sort of determination of that. Or is there anything in the plan for addressing future construction of infrastructure as the development is occurring? For example, if Broster House and Murphy, which currently has a roundabout, let's say that was gonna get a roundabout, they don't have to address the fact of what that intersection is or could be or gonna be, or if it gets shut down for 6 months or 8 months. Or for instance, if the overpass on Reed Market Road gets truly finalized and funded, no traffic analysis has to account for the fact that road's gonna be shut down for 3 years for any sort of emergency evacuation.
Is this coming from the state?
It's not coming from anybody, it's just something that I realized, it's never been a issue or concern.
It's a piecemeal approach is what we're seeing. And what we're seeing in our area is rapid and expansive change that hasn't been fully planned out, including evacuation routes, many other things. But in this particular case, in the lack of notification leading into our conversation, it's not that they did anything wrong. Follow the rules are just, it failed.
Yes, I am not blaming the developer in any way on this, this is literally the fault of the taxpayers, the fault of our government.
So we have invited people outside of our district to engage with us in the past, and even that didn't go anybody. So what we have decided to talk about is what do we think our district might look like going forward. At some point, the city has got to bring these homes into a district, our district, that district, and a new district. But meanwhile, you have people living in homes with no representation. Nobody talking to them, and we don't even know how to get hold of them. So we're just deciding to have a conversation in advance of the conversation. And well, what do we think internally? We think the old farm might we suggest look like if it were to change.
We need thoughts and ideas from anybody because we have no preconceived notions at this point.
Okay, let me ask, so when they were developing, say, on the west side, say, Northwest Crossing or some of the, like, what was the process there? Like, how?
So
is
north.
there any map?
So,
roadmap to know how to do it?
So basically a master planned community by some of the larger developers in town, Brooks Resources and a few others, that put that together. They put it all together and then submitted it to the city and said, here's what we want to do.
You're saying it was more organized,
It was 100% developer led, but at the same time, the developer was putting in all the infrastructure. When I mean infrastructure, like I'm talking Mount Washington, roundabouts, everything. So they accounted for everything, and it's taken them. I mean, Northwest Crossing still isn't completed, and it's been under construction for 20 years. But they basically had a general idea of where the roads were going to be and everything like that.
no one forced them to do it that.
No one forced them to do it that way. It's
Took it upon
Well, you have
themselves.
some of the most prominent developers in that's history came together, we planned, and the city's like, yeah, we're on board with that.
And it also gave them 30 years of work.
So the difference here is this is all being piecemeal.
Well, and in this particular, we called it a ranch deal, this was a one-time state level exemption. With bypass all the normal urban growth boundary things, and so it's the governor's hot button to get affordable housing. And so the
So
governor.
why is it only 30%? Why is it always like,
Because
that's our focus, but yeah, it's the minority.
Because
it
they're-
takes that.
Because they're leaving it up to the private developer to build everything. So the only way a private developer will do it if there's a profit. So of all the developments on this side of the mountain, this is the largest concept of affordable housing ever imagined at this point. And by development, so essentially that leaves the other 70% of the development up to the developer to, what I would say is truly make. If they can make a profit, and that was something that came up in that meeting, and this is a bunch of land use conversation as well, much greater than the scope of this, what we're sort of wanting to focus on tonight. I mean, essentially,
I think the point is that this is the intersection of a whole bunch of issues.
yes,
We just had the fire forum, this is right next to it, and it wasn't considered. We just brought up evacuation routes, never been talked about. You got
That's what it was.
You got Knott Road, what is it, 2 lanes? And you're gonna put 715 more homes that have to go on to not get out.
Yeah,
We figured that out, no.
Yeah, so he died because he's talking about Easton was so under homes too.
Yeah, my point being is that when you look at all these issues, in and out of each individual one is like, yeah, that's an issue, that's an issue, that's an issue. Well, guess what, no one has any input into it, because one, it was an exception, and two, nobody got notified. And the reason we didn't get notified was, as we described,
so,
500 feet, and so if.
well, hang on, we need to do some context here for people. So Jim briefly mentioned Easton. Ross, would you mind bringing up the map of Southeast Bend?
I
Maybe,
mentioned it because they mentioned it.
yeah, so, no, so what I'm gonna mention now is,
Southeast Bend.
so there's a development,
You're talking about southeast area plan?
sure,
You can
or
just-
even
you
just
can
that
just type in
section of
Easton.
town.
And it'll come up on something.
So essentially, there's a neighborhood to the due east of Caldera High School and out in Low Park called Easton. Easton is being built and developed, and they are not a member of the Old Farm District. They are not a member of Southeast Bend. They are 500 feet away from Southeast Bend. We are immediately adjacent to them. It's a polished development. It's basically gonna match and continue on with the bridges and everything that's been going on, building there for the last 10 years. But literally at this point, all of the notifications that have been sent out to the city and that we've been sending out and in Southeast Bend, nobody that has got a house built in Easton is getting any of those notifications. So if we take that and we magnify to all the properties to the east of Easton and to the south of Easton, nobody's gonna get notified of those. And the same thing happened in Stevens Ranch, which is near the new library. That is more than 500 feet from our boundary, it's Old Farms boundary, which is 27th Street. So if the developers continue to build from the houses that they've already started and continue to build in the center and to the east and to the south and to the north, they will be always 500 feet away from Old Farm. So we will be excluded from any sort of land use notification. What's going on?
Which basically eliminates a chance for people, area residents, to have any input on things that are coming in their neighborhood.
Our board thinks this is a problem.
Yeah, so what does it take to annex this area, Easton in particular, or modify?
So
that
the
district?
current laws are everything inside the urban growth boundary chooses when the property owner wants to annex. So there's land owners in the southeast area plan that may not choose to be annexed into Bend, and they have that right, and they can say no. But whenever anybody wants to build a new development, from my understanding, at that point, they have to choose for annexation, because that's the only way they can develop these neighborhoods. Otherwise, they are still rural, they have to follow rural development codes.
Didn't they have to submit that when they submitted their master plan for the whole Easton?
Yes, they did, and I am not sure of this, but I'm assuming at this point, the developer, Polish, has gone through the annexation process for Easton and has annexed that land into the city limits. But the city currently is very ambiguous about the future of any annexation and who or whatever is responsible for communications and how that communications should be done. So we need to figure out how to approach the city and address that. I'm trying to be very polite, Jen.
I think it's safe to say that everything in the elbow is going to get annexed in the city
At some point
at some point.
in the next 25 years.
Yeah, and
So
as
there-
right now, it's still counting.
But you have, that map doesn't even fully state it, because the area where Easton is, which is sort of a lighter color, is much further developed south than that shows. That's not really accurate as of today. There's quite a few homes that are sold, I think, or
I think they've already built a pool house
oh yeah, that's
and
what first
clubhouse.
house.
Yeah, this is at least a year old, if not two.
All along 15th there, and a few far block streets is built with residences in occupations. So, but they don't belong to anybody. They're still an island communication wise. And so the question about, do we talk about this? And if so, how do we talk about it is political, it's also practical, and a lot of other things. It's adjacent to the homes right above that light area, that's the old farm. But that they're not anything at this point. And so as that eastern development, you can see the roads going further east to the right, they're gonna keep going that way. And eventually they'll go all, not this development, but the series through those lots will go all the way up to 27.
Yeah.
So this is just the beginning, and we'll continue to have residents who don't belong to anybody.
And on one quick tangent, Ross, I can't remember. There is a major land use meeting for the development on 15th, north of Murphy,
That's this Thursday.
45 north.
called 45 North,
Or is it north?
North
Is that
45.
the jail ward land?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is this Thursday at what time? 5:30? 6?
I think it's a 5:30.
Okay, we should have that on our
post that.
website.
I have it, I don't know if we posted that to the website, but I'll
Okay.
put a request out to do so.
Let's
So please
post
check
that.
oldfarmbend.com for information to register for that. You do need to register to attend.
Yeah, and you're not registering with us, you are registering with the developer.
It's not.
The city's having a firewalls.
Yeah.
Meeting that night over municipal court, like 5:30 to 8. There's gonna be a district do a district roundtable, but now we're there, so. Notified of that, so.
I go back
It's
to
the same
that.
night, so we're gonna have to split.
If you go back to that picture, Ross, I think it does a really good job of massive reference.
Yeah, here's a notification as well. So this is where I got 228 lots for single family homes and multifamily site and mixed use site, and 4.5 acres of open space. Mixed use,
Did I say this use?
it does say mixed use.
Yeah, and this is the same company that is doing, Caldera as well.
Yeah.
Is it?
The same engineering.
Same engineering firm, right? And this is that vicinity map, so that's the Central Oregon Canal running through here. This is 15th to the east. Sherwood Forest to the north,
Oh, I know.
and then that's Murphy Road and the Murphy
Nottingham.
Bridge.
That's where they've been doing the staging.
Right, Nottingham. Sherwood Forest Drive.
You know, one other thing that I noticed, I've been in Denver for 55 years. And when a development is approved, and then when it kind of fails and gets sold to another developer, like the one on Ferguson right now, between 27th and 15th, is that what it is? There was like a big apartment complex going in there. And yeah, right there. Is that it? Yeah. And so what they're doing there, then they kind of reshuffle the deck and they don't have to tell you any of that. And so now they're gonna dump all those people kind of right where it says Ferguson Road, right?
Yeah, they're cutting a road right where that.
Right
cursor
there.
is, straight up south.
Yep.
And it will connect to, actually already curves around
Yeah,
and over to the Ivy Middle School.
yeah.
So
And so this road, when they brought it up the first time, they were gonna do some traffic calming devices. And now it's just a zoo all day long with trucks and everything. And Leonard took it over and Hayden Homes took it over from the people who went through land use and got it approved. And you don't get notified how now they're like eliminating one of the roads that was coming in and out. They're gonna use all that. And they don't have to go back and talk about traffic calming devices. I mean, I own a couple hundred acres in the city of Bend. I own Scandia RV Park, Scan Square Plaza, and I do some development throughout the Northwest, for the last years. And what's happening here, what you guys are talking about, is when they buy these developments from guys that fail, they can change it.
The master plan has been submitted and approved, and then after that, then they just do addendums.
Then what they do is they're just in there, they're cutting a deal on this road. Oh, we'll just use this. Oh yeah, well, we got that. Oh yeah.
So that removes all of the public.
And there's no input. And so what I would say to the neighborhoods here is, I mean, I've had a
Would you mind
house.
introducing yourself?
My name is Bob Bowden. I live on Sierra Drive.
Okay.
And my brother-in-law lives on Sierra Drive. And we've been around this town for a long time. I mean, a lot of people have. But what is happening with a lot of these developments, and Paulus knows this, and Hayden Watson definitely knows this, once they pick up something that's already approved and they get these addendums, they're not going through any more land use. It's like, hey, this is already a signed contract for the infrastructure. It's a sign this, and it's beyond me why people don't say they're gonna put like a freeway down Ferguson between 15th and 27th. And that wasn't the intent when the master plan was first developed. And it comes back to these evacuation roads. So it's not only, it's you know, it isn't necessarily the developer's fault,
No,
but it's definitely the city's problem that they're not addressing. And I've called a couple people at the state level on some of these things, and they're the ones who told me, oh yeah. Here in Bend, they don't come back. When somebody takes over a master plan, oh yeah, I go,
Well,
well, final plat.
what we've noticed for the old farm is you'll see a lot of developments go in to the master plan under a 5-phase project. And at phase 3, the developer tends to change. So whatever the first 3 phases are, you'll see they get switched. And most repeatedly on the southeast side of town, phase 5 always included the mixed use and commercial. And the city has been pushing for complete neighborhoods. And we have been over and over and over again, the complete neighborhood gets canceled and houses get thrown in phase 5.
Which nullifies the whole objective of keeping people from
Driving,
all over
yes.
to get to a market or whatever.
It creates, it throws off the whole plan for infrastructure designs, road designs, transportation, the long-term transportation plan.
But who's allowed is the question, who's allowing these things?
So I wouldn't say it's getting allowed, I'd say that not enough citizens are complaining about it to make anybody change it.
Yeah, and the city is definitely liable in their comprehensive plan for these things. And when they let the developer switch, and then they pull back on a lot of the requirements, that's just wrong. And, you know, I've done a couple of developments in town here, and normally it doesn't work that way. But it seems like in our part of town, it's the norm. And it's as soon as Taylor or any of these other guys, as soon as they're starting to dig the sewer, everything else is done. And that seems to be, I don't know, I just think it's a travesty that you can take a neighborhood and you can run basically all the traffic through the streets that are there because they never planned.
So as a neighborhood district board, we're limited in our scope. But one of our primary things is communication with the people. What would you recommend? If you weren't a developer, if you didn't own 100 acres of land, if you were Joe Blow living off a
And I kind of even
how would you want to be notified? How would you?
I like the notifications that I get from the whole farm district, and I like this district. And owning property in it for like the last probably 30 years. And I think that you're doing a pretty good job. I just think that some of the developers that are in our area, and they're the same people, like Lennar, they bought that property from, I forget who they bought it from. The one that has Jeff Reed's sign on 27th there, when you turn right to go to the dump. And Jeff, you know, he did a good job. He bought the land, but the people who originally got it approved for the apartments, and then it switched to Lennar, getting homes. And then they got to like, they went in, they got most of the traffic calming things out of our area. And they immediately started putting in sewer, and then everything's done. Because they don't have to come back and do anything. And so to answer your question, who's the city council guy for that?
Mike Riley at this point.
Well, not for our area, but
Does he talk to you guys a lot?
It does. We have a positive relationship.
What does he say about some of this stuff?
So a lot of that's what you just described. I bet if I brought it up with Mike, he would be unaware of it.
And it's, I mean, you know,
Because council doesn't, oftentimes the council that approves the master plan of a project are so long gone by the time any of those changes happen. The councilors that are sitting on whatever board, so I'm always careful about city councils because literally that, master plan approvals by the time things get approved, by the time you see the infrastructure of the shovels show up, that's probably 3 to 4 different city councils by election
But there
cycles.
ought to be continuation, there ought to be documentation, there ought to be some kind of structure so that these regulations don't get switched.
Well, I think what I'm hearing seems somewhat universal, nobody.
Oh, they know, believe me, they know.
The city staff
The
knows.
city knows these developments, but nobody else knows, because I live very close to that too, and I walk it every day, and I have no idea what that is. Even though we've been here, we've talked about the regional development, we had feedback, they changed it, and then poof, that went away, and next thing I know, they're out there bulldozing, and I'm like.
They're going,
And I'm like, you're going, what the hell happened?
That's what I'm saying, I think that the problem is so much bigger than
Yeah,
the
it's
neighborhood
city.
association.
Yeah.
And these new folks that are coming in to live in Easton or wherever, how many of them even know what the term neighborhood association?
Well, let's bring that back,
It means-
because that's kind of the point of the conversation,
Right.
is it's, if we are fostering ignorance if we aren't champions of communication, because there are lots of people right in our media area who have no access to the information because they aren't accounted for. Easton's an easy example. It's being built out, it will change, but today you have those people living in the homes who are absolutely clueless. And what's going on behind them, right behind them, they would have no idea. You know why? We have no idea. So that's kind of a reality, and that's the way things are set up now. But if we are to think about, begin to talk about, what do we think the boundaries of the old farm could be, or southeast or anybody else for that matter. I mean, could it be that the boundaries are inclusive of an area that will be grown into?
So
Is that possible? Can we change the dynamic? Instead of building the houses and then going, oh, where do you want to be? Oh, we'll be there. How about we just say, this is Old Farm?
That's
And
what I was asking.
when you build a house there, you're gonna be in Old Farm.
So was
It's
there,
reverse.
so was there already a neighborhood association in the Northwest Crossing area?
No,
So
The
they
Northwest
created a
Northwest
whole-
Crossing is really a bad example of what we're talking about. Northwest
Because
Crossing
this
so
is
large.
sprawl where that was a master development. What's going on out here is just let it run.
It's the wild
Way
west.
with
Well,
the-
so, well, one thing is the Southeast Area Plan was the first attempt by the city of Bend or any city in Central Oregon of a public-private master plan. So there was a committee that was formed, all the landowners in the Southeast Area Plan and the urban growth boundary were invited to be a member of it. And they supposedly sat down and drafted what was supposed to come. From that point to where we're at now, it sounds like there's been some changes that even I'm unaware of, which doesn't really shock me. But we can make our city councils know of it. We have a meeting with one of them in a week or so to sort of bring up this concepts. One of the things that I had discussed in another group recently was because the Caldera project was done by state legislation, because Stevens Tract was done by state legislation, then it would be okay for the city council to say, due to these exceptions, we are going to make exceptions to the land use rules and other items. And the city council, it would be in their ability to make those changes, and they would not have to be citywide. It would not have to be
Just like-
forever codified for 500 years, so they may be more willing to say, okay, simply because those two things that have been brought in on the southeast side of town are exceptions created by the state legislature, but the city has some say in how they're done. This is what we're gonna propose in a few weeks, is great, then you need to make some certain exceptions. But once again, this all goes back to if somebody that I know, I mean, when I, as the board chair and the land use chair of Old Farm are finding out about something 24 hours due to friends of friends of friends, there's a serious problem. Because if we're not getting the notifications and we're supposed to get these notifications by way of email and by way of actual physical mail, I know for a fact, nobody else is getting anything. Other than unless they know the developer and the developer is telling them privately what's going on.
I think you look at this, what the state, what is the intent? How does that intent apply to what the reality is of that? There's a huge disconnect. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but it's a good time to bring up before everything is built. Bring up the question and say, intent, reality. What can we do here to bridge that?
Well, Polish has a big, I forget what it's called, up in the northeast. Did that,
Petros.
Petrosa,
Yeah.
was that built in land that was already part of an existing neighborhood association? Or,
No, but that was built inside the urban growth boundary and it was a master plan and it was approved.
but did it get
But to your
annexed
point,
into?
yes, but the point is homes first, neighborhoods later. But when you do that, there is no communication in the pre and during process.
I can't speak
And that
for-
seems to be, one of the things that we hear a lot is, I never knew about that, I didn't hear about that. And James is one of the strongest voices, where you needed to talk about this 10 years ago. Okay, well, the 10 years ago is right now. For that. Okay, but we're not hearing about it now because the communication process doesn't work. Because the legal part is blank. The development areas don't belong to any neighborhood.
Right, so who's just gonna make the decision? This one goes to southeast and this one
Well,
goes
that's why
to.
we're having this conversation.
That is why we're having this
That's
conversation.
exactly why we're
We brought this up now to the last 3 or 4 city councils. And nobody wants to address it, but now we're literally at the point we're developing in these areas
People are living there.
that need to be decided upon. And honestly, this isn't about Old Farm wanting to take it all on. I could easily see 2 new neighborhood districts or 3 new neighborhood districts being formed. But in the meantime, somebody needs to be communicating what's going on to the people that already live here. Because the people that already live here are being omitted from the development of tomorrow.
So as an example, I'll just talk about this amazing earth moving project, which we don't even know how it's gonna shape out in the end. But I'll tell you, in the core property of our development, they put in foundations for 3 new signs in the easement. They moved all of our landscaping out of the way, and they wrapped the signs, they're construction, we don't know what they say. This is basically in our front yard. And we're up there like, I wanna get a ladder, cut plaskins, because it might say road, dead end ahead. Because they're gonna have to connect that road into Ferguson sometime. And then
And that's gonna be a mess.
And that's gonna be a mess. And then they're gonna put roundabouts on both ends of Ferguson.
Right.
Those are gonna be a mess.
Right.
And so I'd like to know what the sign in my front yard says.
What street are you on?
Oh, right there on Ferguson.
First.
And the kids that like catch the buses and stuff there, like, I mean, and I'm all for people having houses and development and all that stuff. But if they're not telling the neighborhoods as part of the planning process, hey, if you're gonna develop there, your nearest neighborhood associations here, so you gotta include them the whole time. If that isn't, that's the way it works in Seattle and Tacoma. And they don't let like islands, oh, you're out on the island, okay, we'll get to that later. They need to go like, okay, Old Farm's here, your other one's here. So during the process, you need to go with those people. And the 500 feet goes away because nobody's in the 500.
So that's where we're,
And if they don't do that, then it's.
so we brought that up last fall. We've not, the city has not addressed that yet, but we're trying to stay. We brought that up because we realized they were building houses and we weren't getting any notifications. And we're at this point now that projects continue to happen at a rate faster than I've seen before, and we're not getting any notifications. And it has to do with the 500-foot rule. And the sad thing is, the city with the developers, with the neighborhoods leading the charge 4 years ago through the NLA, it used to be a 250-foot boundary for notifications. And it was literally the Old Farm and a few other neighborhoods like us that were like, that's one lot. You can't have a 500-foot rule when that's one tax lot.
No, and what's happening, and I've seen on 3 or 4 other roads. Ferguson is a good example though, because what they're doing coming out of Ferguson on that road that you were talking about, if you look close to that, that's a travesty. And the reason that is, they changed how they did the inside of the development from where they were putting things, where they were gonna go out. They changed, they got, and I did look up some of this, they got changed, so now there are more trips coming out. But they didn't come back and say, well, what do you think about this? They're gonna figure that out later. And when they figure that out later, it's like, you know, they put sidewalks in on the one side and they didn't on the other side. And they didn't collect any money to do any traffic calming things, any more sidewalks, but they sure are allowing a lot more trips and denser development in that development. And I think in that example, they should have to lower the speed limit, put 3 or 4 more pedestrian crossings at those things as is required in some of the plans that they've adapted, but they're not gonna follow. And so that's why I think somebody's gotta press these people to, hey, if you're gonna dump everything on the street, you gotta open it up for the neighborhoods that are there, instead of just, you know, that's what I would have proposed. And I would have thought that you would have probably.
You know, maybe one of the things not to your previous point, 500 feet. Maybe what we should be pressing for is notification of the boards of all adjacent neighborhood districts. So in the case of Caldera Ranch, and we would, everybody around it would have been notified. Instead of no one.
So I do know the developers were the ones who have been pushing for years to not have the expanded to 500 feet and to keep it at 250 feet because it's considered an additional cost. And then the argument goes, every dollar of additional cost means one less dollar for affordability.
I don't know why that's true if you have to make 2 notifications instead of everything within 500 feet. Let's say, or I mean, maybe in worst case you got 4.
So right now they're asking Jim to sign off on a meeting that nobody in his district basically attended because he didn't have time to notify his district.
No chance. I mean, that's a fundamental failure.
What to do with this thing.
So maybe that's
No,
something.
it's not my district. Outside of my district.
Well, see, and so that is even the case with both this one in Caldera. They are technically outside of the urban growth boundary as it currently sits. The legislation and the city must continue the process and bring it into the urban growth boundary. But right now, the county has no responsibility to notify these people. So we can bring this up to the city, but at the same time, we're talking about the future of Bend. And I'd like to think of things going 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years so that these problems don't keep happening. At some point, the county needs to take responsibility in this as well. But right now, they're just saying, well, this is city of Bend's problem.
You know, and we're for SB 2001, infill is what it is. But where is the real growth then going to take place? It's always going to be on the perimeter.
Yeah.
And so this problem, which we have 2 very clear examples, maybe 3, it's happening right now, is going to be ever ongoing problem in all areas of the city, which are expanding outward.
It's time to address
a fundamental change takes place.
That's why I picked on this, because I knew it was on the edge,
But it's really not on the edge.
Rob, what are your thoughts on this?
Tree
You're
farm.
pretty quiet. And you're the one getting ready to look at some new developments going up right across from your backyard.
Yeah, I mean, that one's already inside the UGB, of course, but,
Where are you?
I'm just off Ferguson and then kind of along Central, the big canal. Central Oregon Canal, or,
You guys are very close to each
Well, and my daughter now lives in there as well.
okay,
Just,
in Ridgewater, if you know where Ridgewater is.
she's off of there.
Okay. I don't know if Bridgewater, but anyway, so, it's very, very near where Ferguson meets 15th. And then there's the canal that's still there, so the new development's kind of in my sight line of the mountains from the backyard, so I have a vested interest in them not going too high, to be honest. And yeah, I think that they're automatically going to be inside. That area is already part of Old Farm District, so that isn't a problem from that communication perspective. But everything east and south of us needs to get figured out, that if it's going to be part of, if it's included in the UGB, then I think it needs to be assigned a district, a neighborhood association, now called neighborhood districts, but whatever, as a part of that whole process up front. And so I think where Easton is needs to get designated now, and Stevens Ranch as well, which is probably going to be its own. What about Caldera Ranch? Yeah, Caldera too. 700.
Now, does that pose a burden on a neighborhood association? Because when you say notifications, that takes money. Yeah, I mean, you're talking like the postcard?
No, so what happens is the developer has to contact the land use chair of a neighborhood district. The land use chair or other representative must attend these public meetings. And then we are then required to ask whatever questions that I guess we deem fit or people have opposed to us regarding the development, get them addressed on file. Those end up in the file that gets submitted to the city. And then there's a document that we are required to basically sign off on, that the developer has done their due diligence in informing the populace. And right now, Jim's gonna have to sign off on a document that the populace has been informed, when I know and he knows, because we were both at that meeting, that no populace was informed, because you literally have people on the other side of Woodside Ranch Road beyond the distance that had no idea of the meeting.
And it's right, that's.
And so the city, it's not a city issue because they live in the county. And so they're now like, what do we do? And I'm like, we're gonna have to go talk to county commissioners as well. And the county commissioners, they have a very different theory and philosophy than the city council
We
does.
can't just ask if they meet these requirements of communicate to these people, communicate to these people.
We're gonna have to literally, since nobody else is doing this, we're gonna have to draft a concept like, if you live in a development, or, you know, if you're a property owner in the rural area, and since it's rural, I don't know, maybe expand it to 1,000 feet. Because due to rural properties being 5 and 10 acres, literally 500 feet is worthless.
What's county regulation? There's no requirement for.
Land use notification, I am unfamiliar with about anything I said rather than making it up.
No, I think it's a good idea. Any of the neighborhood associations on board of the development. Because otherwise you just keep coming up with it.
So in this particular case,
And it's
Old
easier for
farms
the
and-
developer though.
so Old Farms we're dealing with the city on this, and I'll just fill you in. 4 years ago, we adopted, we altered our boundary lines because the former definitions of our boundary lines disappeared. There used to be tax lots that defined the Old Farms southern boundary line. Well, those tax lots got sold and turned into 25 different tax lots, which got developed. So after that happened, we said, we need to come up with a new definition of our boundary line. So this is another thing that we're actively talking with the city about. So when you say it can't even be adjacent, because according to our bylaws, our boundary lines go to the urban growth boundary as far as notification. The city doesn't consider our boundaries past the city limit. So Caldera Ranch is adjacent to the urban growth boundary, but there's this big gap of nothing in between. So according to the city, nobody should be getting notified, which once again goes back to what Brian's been saying. What is the intent and how is it actually happening? So we've attempted to address this when our former boundaries disappeared. They were literally like a 10-acre piece of parcel that got sold and developed. So that the boundary that we had been going by was tax lot number blah, 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 blah. Well, blah, 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 no longer exists. And the city, when they do these annexations, when they did the urban growth boundary expansion in 2016, when they did it in 1998, they never brought up any of these bureaucratic issues of notifying the public. That was never part of the conversation in the 2016 urban growth boundary expansion. I just want you to know that in the room and those on TV, like, people have been thinking about this, but it's just one of those topics that, oh, we'll address that later. We just keep getting told later, and later, and later. Well, we're 5 minutes up from our meeting.
Right, can we put out like I kind of want to put out a request to city council to, as soon as a development is going to be built to city standards and going to be included in the UGB, it gets put into the
But
UGB.
they can't say UGB, because in the case of like Caldera Ranch, those 100 acres,
Yeah.
we didn't pick those. And really, the city didn't necessarily, but they come from the supply that UGB acres we're gonna get the next expansion. Those 100 acres are gonna be subtracted. So nobody in the city can tell you where the UGB is gonna be, where the expansion is
Oh,
gonna
because
be.
it'll be beyond.
But, well, no, they need to say, well, we just got 700 in the south, so no, we're gonna put the other 50 acres over northeast. And so this elbow thing not get incorporated or beyond, for years.
Well, the elbow,
Well, not the
It has to be
elbow,
incorporated to be
but
put
the other expansion
Correct.
might not.
it must be annexed in the city limits in order to be built to the high density standards of House Bill 2001 or the urban standards created by Proposition 5 40 years ago about saving farmland.
So the request that I would like to make then of the city is to, as soon as that happens, to annex it, and then have it built, have all development occur to city standards, which includes communication.
But don't you think that's
And be
too far
assigned.
down the road?
Or is that
Is this
too late?
Yeah, as I say, I think the boat's already left to talk about that point. In order to get feedback on residents who might be affected by said development, that notification has to happen way back here. And right now, that's the gray area because of UGB,
The delay of notification at this point means there's nobody has any say in it. Which goes back to.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
So what's the trigger?
No, what you're saying though is something you gotta at least ask.
Yeah, so-
What's the trigger for the city to, for somebody to be able to even submit a master plan or to submit a master plan for development to city standards? Whatever that trigger is, insert their communication to neighboring districts, as well as, if that then gets annexed.
So here's what we can do. I want to wrap this meeting up. Let's get a board vote on this. If Jim wants to join us, I suggest that we, as a board, go to a city council meeting, use our 3 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Make this
3
point.
minutes now, 3 minutes?
Well, isn't that what the public, it's always been 3 minutes unless it's a really big issue. And then it gets knocked over to 30 seconds.
So many people who are.
It's usually 2 minutes. So I just wanna make
We'll
sure.
just go up one after another.
Yeah, that we have to do that.
So that we've done before, and I can also speak with a stutter.
We cut you off, so.
Oh, nobody with a stutter ever gets cut off.
Oh, really?
It's not easy.
Not this council.
And then, we present this with just lots of open-ended questions, and we do this, in the next month, because it is the end of the fiscal year, so the last thing they're gonna be worried about is this topic.
When they are going on vacation.
July, they take a break, but I still think they have a meeting or two.
Do we want to be in that window or they're like, yeah, we're going on vacation, or do we want to wait until they come back?
I was gonna say, at this point, the topic is such a broad topic, the earlier we get it on and we just make it in their face. And the more people, like if Jim is, and if it's Old Farm and South, you say, this is a problem you guys must address because you're the only ones that can. And at the same time, we need to probably go to a county commission meeting and say the exact same thing, and except in that case, we won't be the loud voice in the room, we need to bring the residents of Woodside Ranch. Because they're the ones who are being screwed over by not having, but because their true political representative isn't pushing for them to be notified.
We also have that, map list, if we wanted to, we could reach out. We got really positive feedback from those people who came to the fire forum. They've never gotten a postcard from anybody before, except the taxi people. And so they're like, wow, we got invited to the fire forum, this is great.
We got friends.
Yeah, and so they might want to go to, a council, commission meeting like that. Likewise, say, you know what, bring them, but we're not.
Okay, so then let's, for the end of this meeting, when we talk with Commissioner, or Councilor Platt and Woodside in a week or so, let's present that. If anybody else has anything to say, or anyone online has anything to say, raise your hand real quick. Otherwise, we're gonna,
Let's have one thing that I would like to help work on is from Ferguson, that's in my backyard, so I am bringing it up. And from 15th to 27th, I think we should somehow get them to put more crosswalks and more traffic calming devices, and maybe lower the speed limit to 30 or 25 miles an hour.
I think it just got lowered from 40 to 35, right?
so all of that, we can do. And there's a process, the neighborhood street safety program, that we can submit a request to, and if you wanna help us do that.
I'd love to.
And if we can do that,
Because guys are going 50 in big trucks
and then,
right now.
and then for that,
I put in speed bumps.
the fastest.
Well, they gotta do something, or they gotta
So the fastest way to get that, and heard by the people that truly matter would be to talk to the, Go Bond Committee.
Go bond committee.
So there's
whatever.
the Transportation Bond Advisory Committee. Which is basically allocating funds for the Go Bond of 2020, the $195 million. So Ferguson isn't part of that. There's no money allocated for Ferguson, but what they are doing is they're shifting and they're altering the money around from projects that were allocated to other projects that they're determining are more important.
So do you think any new project actually has any realistic chance of cracking that?
Absolutely.
New
Because,
project?
yes, because the general fund is still required to come up with projects when they're needed. Anytime you have a development that happens, infrastructure must be provided.
Not too targeted.
That committee has been sort of tasked with allocating the NSSP funds. So crosswalks and everything, NSSP funds definitely.
Safety.
Yeah, neighborhood street safety.
Not
That's
completely
what
agree.
That's what we gotta do, we gotta do that.
So anyone online have anything to say? We can still chat if you want.
Yeah, I think they dropped off.
Stop recording, we're done.
Thank you.